going on, Jeromes? It's a beautiful Tuesday. Birds are chirping and stuff, and it's time for. So we're trying a new format with the Q&A because I love doing the question and answer session, getting some interaction with the Jeromes, but it got too unwieldy. I mean, getting like 100 questions. So we split it up, and we'll do daily-ish videos, just answering 5 good questions, and helps pare down on some of the redundancy. Lots of more questions. What's going to happen with Kirk, as well as really expand, which I don't know. I was expanded anyway, but there you go. But first up is nun grandma. But if you're a nun, like, how did you reproduce? Do you think we take a D lineman in the first or a quarterback? Also, love the work, Andy. Keep it up. Thank you. And it really depends on what happens with Kirk Cousins, what happens with Danielle Hunter. And so I always include edge rushers as D linemen, even though they're technically stand-up outside linebackers in our offense. Don't really care. But the Vikings, if they let Kirk go, it's 100% quarterback. Even if Kirk is back, I think it's like 90% quarterback. And especially the way that the board is likely going to break down. Let's bring that up. So I think 3 quarterbacks go in the top 3 picks, whether it's the Bears, Washington, New England, or a combination of whatever teams trade up. I think that there's probably going to be 3 wide receivers taken in the top 10 as well. You look at Harrison Jr., you look at Neighbors, you look at Odunze, you look at, and also offensive tackles, Joe Walt, Fashanu, as well as I think that probably an edge rusher or 2 sneaks in there, Verse, etc. And the Vikings, if they re-sign Danielle, that lessens the need at edge rusher, and also what happens with DJ Wanham, that's a question mark, or also what happens in free agency. They're definitely not bringing Marcus Davenport back. But frankly, I pointed this out before, I think the Vikings are actually sitting pretty good in terms of there's going to be a run on offensive tackles. There's going to be a run on wide receivers, 2 positions that the Vikings have pretty solid. Also, throw in Brock Bowers as a tight end. Vikings obviously knocking on all the wood once Hawkinson is healthy and back at it. I think that the Vikings, even if they stick and pick at 11, I mean, there's going to be a lot of talent pushed down to them. And for quarterbacks, so I think May Williams Daniels will go win, play, show 1, 2, 3 in some order, and the rest. I mean, Penix, Nix, McCarthy, Ewers if he declares, I think could be in the first round mix for defensive tackles. I mean, this is still very early. Also, it doesn't even have our guy Tavondre Sweat on there. But Jerzon Newton could be a factor all up in there. I love me some Byron Murphy the second, day 2. And I think this is a really solid defensive tackle class. It's a very deep quarterback class as well. Plus, edge rushers are going to be plentiful. I mean, it's pretty damn good in terms of what the Vikings need. Next up, R3. You touched on it briefly, but can you expand on your thoughts on the 13-4 season last year? Was it more brilliance by Kevin O'Connell, or just highlighting how talented this rooster was under previous regime? Well, I think it's a combination. I think Kevin O'Connell coming in, breath of fresh air. I think it sort of jolted some life into this team, and it's sort of like what you see when mid-season, if a unpopular head coach is fired, the interim gets a little bit of bump. You saw it with McDaniels and Antonio Pierce. Now, I'm not saying that Zimmer is what was unliked, right? Zimmer certainly was good during his run here. Sort of at the end, not so much, but it is what it is. But the Vikings, I mean, the Vikings ran above expectation. Now, people point out the point differential, whatever, but I think the Vikings played some good football. Also, I think they had a couple things go their way, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But the Vikings, I mean, last year was fun. It didn't end up great in the wild card round. Lots of people blame Kirk Cousins, but also why don't you blame the defense for giving up 431 and 31 to Daniel frickin' Jones, as well as, hey, Hawkinson, just break 1 tackle. I mean, who do you think you are, like Kyle Rudolph out here? Come on, man. But I mean, the Vikings, I mean, there's some memorable games. So the Josh Mattel's breakout game week 3 against the Lions. What else was in here? Oh, and also the defense was bad. Defense straight up bad last year, but they would come up with these big plays when you needed them to, like at the end of the Bears game, like at the end of the Patriots and the Jets games. So it's just the defense was certainly unreliable, but they would just randomly come up with huge plays. And you could say that's fluky, sure, but it probably wasn't sustainable. All right, and the Vikings. Um, uh, I mean that the Colts game will always be legendary. The Christmas Eve game, the first one against the Giants was good. The what else? Oh, obviously the Bills game too. All right, so I mean, last year was a lot of fun, and the Vikings, they played some good ball, and they got lucky, and that's exactly what you need. This year, they play good ball at times, and they did not get lucky, and that's sometimes how the ball bounces. Speaking of which, R. Anderson, what's your top moment from the season and biggest WTF moment? Thanks for the stream, Skull. All right, so there's a lot. There's a lot. So top moment. Probably beating the Niners, going into Green Bay, dropping a deuce before Kirk popped his Achilles. I think that 2-game stretch was the high watermark of the season. Doing that without JJ as well. The low watermark, I mean, there's tons of them. And, I mean, we highlighted on the graphic the Ed Ingram forced fumble on Kirk against the Buccaneers week 1. That's when he knew, it was like, maybe this won't be it. And the Vikings just constantly having fumble issues at the beginning of the season. And then, yes, Kirk was gone, but the gong show at quarterback, just give it away now, was certainly frustrating the rest of the way. So, I mean, you chalk it up, but like, okay, no JJ for 7.5 games, no Kirko, and also Hawkinson got injured, and there was numerous injuries on the defense as well, and just be like, just wasn't meant to be this year. But it's still super frustrating because the Vikings shoulda, coulda, woulda won 8 out of 10 games. The first 8 losses. Yeah. Stuff, man. Stuff. Next. Tori Hansen. How do you feel about Caleb Williams, pros and cons, and do you think he transitions well to the NFL? I'm tapping the brakes on the generational talent label because, I mean, if he had been able to declare as a true sophomore last year, I think he's clearly number one. I think that the Bears probably just stick and pick at 1 and take him. But I think that there was certainly some question marks this year. And, you know, with Williams, he's been labeled Mahomes. The next Mahomes, better prospect than Mahomes for so long. I feel like people almost got tired of it. Right? But this year, Williams, I think his footwork is erratic. I think he tries to play hero ball too much. I think he tries to improvise too much at times. And he's got the skill set to do that, sure. But, I mean, you saw how USC operated with the backup quarterback in the bowl game. I mean, the offense was fantastic, man. Malone Moss, let's go. Let's go, man. And I do put a number of USC's losses towards the end of the season on Caleb Williams. And I'm not talking about, hey, well, he cried, hey, he did this. Like that's not really a factor for me. But I think on the field, like he really struggled this year. He did. And like he had a good season. He did not have a great season. And I mean, hell, part of that is no Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison is the kingmaker. He made Kenny Pickett a first-round pick. He made Williams the Heisman winner. Williams still might end up being the first overall pick, but also you look through, I mean, Williams, I mean, he's 6'1", 215, yes, but I think teams are going to fall in love with Drake May. I mean, Drake May is built like a tank. He's built like Josh Allen. He plays like Justin Herbert, the good parts. And I think teams are going to be dialed in. Jaden Daniels certainly is intriguing as well. Penix, aside from the injury issues, yes. McCarthy has all the physical tools, yes. But I think Williams, I would doubt if he falls out of the top 2. But there certainly is some cause for pause. And I think that he's not the surefire bet that a lot of people make him out to be. And he still may be good. And that's certainly part of it. But I don't think that he's... How many generational talents, how many can't-miss prospects have been at the top of the draft that missed? All right. I'm not saying that I wish that upon him, unless he goes to the Bears. But the Bears will just ruin him, whatever. But he's certainly not a stone-cold left-by block like a lot of people think. There you go. Lastly, Michael Converse. Now that the season is over, do you have anything you'd like to vent, a little regrets or optimism? Being intentionally open-ended here. Man, so just look back on the season. Again, injuries. So injuries are a main part of it, and injuries are part of the game. I mean, every single team in the playoffs deals with injuries. You look at the Dolphins right now. You look at the freaking Browns, right? But at the end of the day, it's not an excuse, and it's a results-oriented business. And I don't care who was at quarterback. They should have won the Broncos game. They should have won the second Bears game. They should have won the Bengals game. And they should have won the first Lions game. And that completely changes the paradigm. All of a sudden, you shift a 7-10 season to at least a 10-7 season, and you got it made in the shade, right? And I don't like the blanket excuse like, oh, it's just injuries. Oh, it's just injuries, right? So injuries excuse poor play calling at the end of the Broncos game. Poor injuries excuse the absolutely atrocious and ass game plan and end of game play calling against the Bears. Injuries excuse giving up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and a field goal in overtime against the Bengals, blowing a 17-3 lead. And also, injuries don't excuse the tush pushes. You know, with Brandon Powell back-to-back plays behind Bradbury, it's ridiculous, man. So I feel like Kevin O'Connell is a good coach, and I want him to grow and show here in the great state of Minnesota. I think that he still has potential, but he's got to learn from these mistakes, and he can't. It shouldn't be allowed for him to just chalk it up to, well, we had injuries. No, I mean, it was bad coaching, and it was bad game management. It was bad team management towards the end. Also, Week 17 against the Packers, you're at home. And you have a chance to really solidify your playoff position, as well as you have a chance to knock the Packers out of the playoffs. And you and your team shows up with that horse bleep effort. No. And you could say injuries, you could say whatever. Vikings should have hung with the Packers. Worst defense in the league. And also, I don't like the way that he handled the quarterback carousel. Pick one dude after the bye week. If it's going to be Dobbs, roll with Dobbs the whole way. If it's going to be Mullins, roll with Mullins the whole way. If it's going to be Hall, roll with Hall the whole way. I don't think that he did Dobbs any favors pulling them against the Raiders. I don't think that he certainly did not do Hall any favors with his game plan, as well as a quick hook against the Packers. If you're going to start him, start him. Just this whole flip-flop thing, it didn't benefit anyone on this team. It certainly did not benefit the quarterbacks, right? And also, I mean, it's frustrating in the beginning of the season, the Vikings losing the turnover battle every single loss. And, I mean, the Bucs game was frustrating. They should have beat the Eagles, who are clearly fraudulent. The Chargers, that loss just sucks. And, you know, that was the one where Hawkinson had the fumble at the start of the game. And then at the end, like, you know, people pissed on Kirk Cousins, like, hey, why didn't you clock it? Well, Kirk had the ball in Hawkinson's hands, both hands on it. Yeah, it was a little bit of a fastball, but you were in the end zone with the ball in your hands, 2 hands on it. That's what you paid for, bro. So that one sucks. Also the Caleb Evans. How the hell does that end up being a touchdown? Should have been his first career interception. Also the officiating against the Chiefs. Also the officiating in the Lions game. Also the officiating in the Bengals game. Yeah, it's just tough. Just tough, man. Also, I mean, the Saints game really pissed me off, too, because the Vikings should have blown the Saints out, but the second half, O'Connell just coached not to lose and was playing scared, and Jameis almost led them all the way back. It's frustrating, man. But, I mean, Falcons game was a lot of fun. Passionate mania. Let's go. And that 3-game stretch, the Niners, Packers, and the Falcons, I mean, that was peak, even with Kirk's injury, which was what it was. So, yeah, that was the season. It's a good question. Anyways, I like this format. Let me know what you think about this format. Should we go long? Although that was only 5 questions, so if we kept up this pace, like Q&A would take 2 hours. But you guys are the best. You know what to do. Skol, production value.